Watch a movie, get inspired, give back, help a charity. It's time for a Movikarma watch party. Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Milrad, and welcome to another Movikarma watch party. This is a series that we're doing to celebrate socially conscious films and filmmakers all around the world. And today we're really excited to have Christine with us, who's the director of an award-winning film, Adam, which we celebrate as part of our Show for Change Film Festival. And we celebrate socially conscious films every single month through that festival. So Christine, really excited to have you in the conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and screen your film, Adam, and then on the back end, we'll do some questions about the project, why you made it, and lots of other good stuff. So let's dive right in.
I can't ever go out because background noises are really, really horrible for me. So I could never do going to the bar type of situations. You can't have a conversation because you hear so many things like, what is that, like the gas line?
That sounds like it.
Yeah, but in a restaurant, I would always hear like the kitchen staff, and I can't hear a conversation around me because my ears focus in on that. I'm Adam Stockton. I go to hockey games and like to watch the Kings hockey. I draw a little. I used to be really committed to art, but I just doodle all the time now. I work at an engineering firm 40 hours every week. I do deliveries, I make copies, I do expert witness cases. Noises are overbearing for me. It's been very difficult to explain it. You know, you're like understanding things differently from everyone else. So I screw up at work all the time, and I know it's because of the disorder. Where we at with that? Well, you brought back those bosses about the rest of it. Yeah, no, you got three more shows. was obviously bullied in high school. I got nicknamed Ralph Wiggum. He is known as the dumb kid. My brother always says I'm the mature one. I hid my birthday on Facebook, and somehow I'm still getting all the notifications. It's the fakest crap there is. I don't even know who this person is. He's playing the song right now. This is What's New Pussycat. Yep. That's him right now. That's Tommy Jones on the drums. And Axl Rose on the bass. People gravitate to me because of my boyish charms and my sense of humor. I have a friendly face. People see a 12-year-old kid in my face. They need someone just to laugh with, and that's what the option is with me. Everyone needs laughter in their lives. I told you it was clap time. Yes, very clap time. At some point, I wanted to be like a comedic actor. Why'd you say that? I wanted to be a cop when I was a little kid. I can't be fully committed to a profession, so I stay in this crappy job I've been in for 13 years. I can't hear. Oh, I hear this music playing really loud. I'm gonna scream all the time. Huh? I'm Walter. How are you? Adam, what's up? Are you guys like pros at this bowling shit? How are you, dude? So, Olympic board. Yeah. We've been on the Olympic bowling circuit back in our high school. So. Nice. Now we're high school kids. And we were bored. We're in our 50s and we're like, okay, let's go out drinking. Yeah, That's exactly my plan. It's my birthday yesterday. So, hey, how old are you? 33. My birthday. Yeah, all right. My birthday. Yeah. My birthday, August 16th. We're like 24. We're like, I don't let my disorder define me, but it's definitely a part of me. It sucks because I don't want it to be, but I don't know. It's hard to open up when you know you're gonna mishear a conversation. I try to train myself to get as much detail accurately as possible, which comes off as like stalkerish, creepy. Because I remember, and they forget, they tell me.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that, Christine. We really love the film, obviously, which is why we awarded it for one of our most recent festivals. I have a bunch of questions for you, but to start off, we'd love to just learn a little more about your background, which I think is interesting, and I saw in your director's statement it connects to the film. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about that.
My background, like where I grew up, or
yeah. So I saw that you specifically, like, you grew up in Montreal, correct? And you wrote about how you spoke French growing up, but were sort of, if I remember correctly, in an all English school, and how that impacted you.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Montreal, and my first language is French, but my parents decided, learning English would be good. So they sent me to an English school. And for the first few years, like, I don't feel like I really started learning English until like the second year into school. Like the first year, I feel like it was a lot of like, but I was a kid, so it's kind of cute and funny looking back, like you're 6 years old in kindergarten. Like I was just copying off my peers, trying to copy the shape of their letters and things like that. And like tried to get away with it as best I could. But yeah, for a long time, I think I came off as a really, really shy person, even though that wasn't really who I was. It was just that, there's this like anxiety about getting the words right, and then so often being misunderstood. And I mean, it's kind of like, there isn't like one specific moment. It just things that happen consistently where professors, with teachers, like would just, talk to me a different way, or give me different types of like assignments and homework, or even grade me lower because they think like I was dumb. But it was just like, it takes me a longer time to answer because I have to like translate in my head, or like, you know, and so having to kind of fight for that at some point. Like my grades in my French classes were completely different than my grades in my English classes. And it wasn't because I was stupid. It was just like almost like a social anxiety.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I related personally to, you know, Adam's struggle in that sense. And then as I explained, obviously I don't have an auditory processing disorder.
Mm.
So like, you know, thank God in a way, like I was able to move through that. But yeah, so what hit home for me was more the aspect of connection and the invisible disability and like the prejudgment that people can have because of that. So yeah.
So it sounds like that experience gave you a certain degree of empathy for others who have similar challenges. Did you find a community around you that were either, you know, English as a second language students, or how did you navigate that as a young person? Were you just alone the whole time with it?
My best friend for the first couple of years was also like a francophone, and we were just like stuck together the whole time. But then we switched schools, and after that, it got really hard. That's when it started. Like I needed to blend in more. So no, there wasn't really much of a community, I would say, other than that. It was only later on, like I switched to French school and feeling like I would be with the community, but then that was a whole other ordeal because ultimately I didn't fit in there either. After like so many years being with a bunch of Anglophones, like my cultural references were so different. So, and my accent was different and all this stuff. So, yeah, so not really. Not
right. That's interesting. And then you became even more different because.
Exactly. Well, ultimately, you know, it works out, I guess,
right.
End of the world, but yeah.
And how did you decide, before we get to the specifics of the Adam story and the film, but I'm curious, how did you decide to use film as a medium, you know, in particular? Like did some of those experiences around difference and feeling maybe left out or not included or discriminated against, like did that impact you in terms of deciding to become a filmmaker?
I don't know if that would have been what impacted me specifically. Definitely, you know, always felt like art was always just a way to kind of get a lot of those emotions out. I think there's definitely like a communication aspect to it where like there's something about film that's just, you can communicate an emotion and a message, you know, whether you understand the language or not. Sometimes you don't even need words and you can all of a sudden grasp this deeper meaning that, you know, you otherwise wouldn't, or you get to enter these worlds that you don't have access to. And I think that's what, you know, film did that for me. I also connected a lot to, like you were talking about community, right? Like that's where I found my community. It was through like French language television at home, or like films that express the same kind of feelings that I was going through. So it was always just a really strong mode of communication for me. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. To find that sense of community. And yeah, and some filmmakers talked about film as a universal language. That's why I asked, because you're talking about language barriers. With Adam's story in particular, could you talk a little bit about how this story came to you? I understand a Facebook post was involved, perhaps. How did this happen?
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, like I'm doing my master's degree now at UCLA, so this was part of that. We had to make a documentary, but we had the constraint where we had to make it in LA. And I found that that was difficult for me at first. I'm really into character pieces. I think that's what hits home for me, and that's what I like to watch. So I was like, I don't really know that many people in LA. What do I do? My mom's an audiologist though, so I grew up with like ears posters in my house. You know what I mean? Like she's just really into that stuff. She does hearing tests. She especially likes to work with specialty cases, like people who have auditory processing disorder or ringing in their ears, things like that. And so I was always kind of really aware of that, always hearing her side of the story, trying to advocate for these disabilities that not many people hear about. And then more recently, the fact that APD often gets misdiagnosed, and is diagnosed for autism. Like the more and more psychologists in Quebec anyway are getting the power to diagnose before asking for hearing tests. So anyway, all that to say, I was around that a lot. It had been on my mind a lot, and I figured, hey, like that could be just a good subject to touch on. I don't know anyone personally who has this in LA. I'm just gonna go on social media, and assuming that if someone wants to reach out, like if someone reaches out and emails me, it's because they have something they want to say, you know, and so I can support that, you know, rather than like knocking on people's door and forcing myself in. So this was just kind of a way of getting people in. So yeah, I started with a Facebook post. I asked, you know, if you have any kind of hearing disability and you feel like you want to get the message across and you have a story to tell, you know, come show up on this date. And then I had a day full of interviews at UCLA and had like 7 people show up. And Adam was actually the first person to come in. And yeah, the second he walked in, like that first clip that you see at the beginning of the film is from that interview. Like he essentially just walked in, we had the cameras, and he started telling us about his life and the struggles he went through. And I was just like, yeah, it sounds about right. Like, sounds like this person, you know, has a story to tell. So.
And yeah, that's fascinating that that's how you met him. And it sounds like pretty quickly you decided that he was kind of the subject of the film.
Yeah, I think it was just, he's grown a lot since, and I'm really happy for it. You can kind of see it in the film where it's like, he seems a little bit hopeless in the end, you know what I mean? And like, I think as filmmakers, especially when you're making a short, you're kind of trained to have some kind of happy ending, but at some point I was like, you know what, this is his life. Like, it is what it is, and this is how he feels, and there's no, I think it's okay to honor like his reality. But yeah, I think in the moment where he showed up at UCLA, there was something about him that was very raw, and you could tell that it had been on his heart like for a long time, you know. So there were 2 things. One, I think just like something about that communicated something really deep about just experiencing that disability, living with it for a long time. And then also the fact that he's a man and he's able to be that close to those emotions. Like, he's not getting super emotional on screen, and he is actually, like, he does make a lot of jokes, he's fun to be around, but you know, to see that sensitivity was, I don't know, I thought it was really nice. Like, yeah, he just seemed very aware, you know, of what he was going through. So
yeah, there's something beautiful in that, his narrative, that he's listening more than maybe we all are in a lot of ways. I was curious if, just for folks watching who maybe don't know what this disorder is. I know I didn't know a ton about it. I think I've heard of it in passing, which I really love that your film sort of took a really personal look at it. Can you explain what auditory processing disorder is and what we know about it?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, the super simple way of looking at it is it's like dyslexia, but for hearing. And they often come hand in hand. Often people with dyslexia will have APD and vice versa. It presents in different ways. So this is something, if you look at the ears, it comes in like 3 kind of parts, right? You've got the outer ear that captures the sound, the middle ear that sort of takes those sound waves and translates them into like more of a mechanical situation. And then after that, that gets processed into the brain. And so auditory processing disorder is that brain part where the words come in fine, but then they get jumbled or mixed up. Or sometimes it's, let's see, like instead of elephant, you'll hear effluent, you know? Or if there are lots of noises happening at once or several conversations, like at a party, normally our brain is able to discern, like, I'm having a conversation with this person and this is the only, like, my brain can block out everything else. Someone with APD can't do that. Every single conversation comes in like at the same frequency and the same level of importance in their brain. So it's so much harder for them to, you know, like discern and take in those specific words. So hopefully that makes it clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. And it sounds like it's different for different people. Is that right? So there's different degrees of severity and different outcomes depending on what specific type of APD they have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam said, I mean, he said a number of fascinating things in the film. Before we get to that, I'm curious just about stylistically some of your choices. One of the things I loved personally was the way you sound in the film, and how you, I think, gave us maybe a little bit of insight into Adam's world and what sounds sound like to him. Was that intentional, and how did you go about that process of, you know, maybe replicating or recreating what he might be experiencing, if that was your intent behind it?
It was definitely intentional. I didn't want to make a doc that explained auditory processing disorder. I wanted it to be personal, and I mostly wanted us to feel, hopefully get some sense of just like what it might be like to go in, day out with this, like feeling aggressed by so many sounds. Even though obviously we'll never be in his head, so we'll never know. But so I knew stylistically I wanted to do that. And then we kind of started with a pre-interview where we went into his office with him. That's not true, actually. There was the pre-interview. So when we met with him the first day, he told us a lot about specific sounds, right? Like specific experiences. And so we kind of took note of that, went into a pre-interview at his office with him, same thing. He kind of, as we were walking around, he would say like, you know, this, like I hear the printer all day, even when I'm at the other end of the office, you know, or I hear this or I hear that. And so he would be naming this off. And I thought, you know, like him naming it off to me was already like, you know, kind of big, like just in person, but I felt like cinematically as a viewer, it would be more powerful to just show it. So that's what we did. We just like kind of went through the list of all the things that we couldn't do all of them, but a lot of them, and figured like, let's try that. You know,
right.
Translates. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice. This is that longer shot where we're kind of just moving and we hear everything. Did you add a lot of that after, or were those sounds really there and we were, you know?
No, yeah. We added a lot of it after, for sure. I mean, you know how it is. Like, the sounds would have been there on set, but the actual capturing of the sounds, like capturing the sounds, might not have been that great. So I worked with a sound designer for that, and he helped a lot. He did a bit of Foley and whatnot. The conversations were like from the actual office, but most of the sounds were recreated afterwards.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little more about Adam. You talked a little about his sensitivity. I was struck by one of his comments he made when he was scrolling through his Facebook happy birthday notifications. He mentioned that basically none of them are real. Like they're just all kind of meaningless things. I think a lot of us have that feeling every year if we were on Facebook or are on Facebook or any social media platform. But that struck me. Like, did you think that he, maybe for lack of a better word, is like more attuned to you know, people who are being genuine or not genuine? Like, where do you think that was coming from in him?
I feel that way. I think it was kind of a demonstrative of a cumulative experience of people just not giving a fuck. My friend. But
that is
like one thing that came up a lot just when we were with him is that when he makes friends, like, or he used to do this, he does it less now, he would try to explain what was up and what his needs were, and it was often kind of blown off, or you often feel like you are a burden to the people you're with. So it's interesting, like most of his connections he has like online through like gaming, you know, stuff like that, forums, that he doesn't have a problem with. So everyone in person, like the people from high school that are like wishing him a happy birthday on Facebook, he's like, you know, y'all don't even know me. Like, you know, this community, all the ways that he talks to people is mostly just a mask, from what I understand from him. Like, it's, you know, him trying to act out a social experience that he isn't fully a part of, right?
Yeah, and the other part of that was when they were bowling. I mean, that encounter, I imagine was just spontaneous, and you were capturing this. I mean, could you?
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, that seemed to be insane just to watch. I mean, I was struck by the the guys that were talking to him and how they kind of maybe intentionally or not just sort of talked down to him, I guess is the term I would use. Was that did you talk to Adam after that experience, or?
I mean, we spoke at the end of the shoot day. Did we speak particularly about that? I don't think so. I think he was more concerned that the dudes were flirting with his friend.
Right.
Like that's what he kind of brought up, because I remember that. But he didn't talk about the way they were talking to him. He didn't mention that. That was just something that I don't know. I mean, you saw it, I saw it too, and I just thought, like, this is absurd. This is probably, very often how he's treated. So
yeah, right.
Important to show. But no, he didn't really talk about it afterwards. Yeah.
It seems like he also struggles with pretty openly, or maybe at least openly to you, challenges with depression and his own mental health. Did you find that he had or now has some community or some support system to deal with that?
Yes, I think so. Like it was interesting because the film was kind of an opportunity for him to open up about that a bit more. Some of his friends, his close friends that showed up to his birthday party weren't even super aware of it, So it was an opportunity for him to talk about that during the night with them, and it was nice. Like from what I witnessed, a lot of people were interested. Well, his friends were interested, the ones that were there. They were asking questions and trying to understand and stuff. And I mean, that's not in the film, but it kind of prompted those discussions with them. That's also actually how the discussion came up with the men in the bowling alleys. They asked him, they were like, "Why are you being filmed?" And he was like, "Oh, I can't hear anything." So that's kind of part of it, where normally he might hide that. This was kind of a way for him to, even at the office, to explain, like, why am I being filmed? This is what's happening. And then people finally starting to pay attention in a way, like, oh, okay, maybe he's not just weird, like that weird quiet kid, like, oh, he has a disability, like, what is that? So there was that. And then also him and I, he opened up to me for this doc specifically about his depression, and I don't think he had ever done that before. And I had a male producer with me, so he also felt more comfortable with another guy talking about that stuff. And a few weeks after we finished shooting, he told me, like, I started seeing a therapist. He got that Death Eater tattoo removed, which kind of sucks because I liked it, but I think for him it was like a big, heavy thing. So he's been doing better from what I understand.
Wow. So yeah, I mean, that's interesting too, that I think a lot of times we think of film as impactful on the viewer, but what you're describing is impactful on the subject, the person in the film. What resources do you think, or what changes do you think might be needed in our society? I mean, other than which maybe is this is the main change, but just sort of being better people, like listening and respecting each other more and our differences. But are there broader changes that you or Adam or others that sort of that brought up in the film around people, helping people and supporting people who have disorders like these?
Yeah, I believe a lot in just creating understanding. That's why I make films. I think it's, not just like educating ourselves. I think it's important. Educating ourselves on what the disorders are, creating understanding, really understanding what it means for him and having empathy. I even asked him, his big struggle is he felt like he wanted people to know, like, if I'm like, I need to read your lips, you know what I mean? Like, I need to look at your face when I'm talking to you. It's not weird, it's not creepy, like, it's just the way it is. So I don't know, I think it comes through education and like awareness a lot. That seems to be what he struggled with the most, was one, just access to the knowledge of that specific disorder. It took him a long time to get a diagnosis, which meant that for many years, you know, there wasn't a support system for him at school and whatnot. And then two, for just understanding in the sense that, like, once he was diagnosed and would seek out help, you know, in his workplace or at school, like from teachers, it wasn't necessarily taken seriously. You know, people just don't necessarily want to make the effort, I guess. Right. So that I don't know, though. I also come from a country where we have like universal healthcare, right? So right. We kind of, you know, services are a little bit more accessible. I think he also talked about, you know, some, like, my mom's an audiologist. She gives these tools and therapies for people who have these disorders. I think that's harder to access for him. He's in Riverside, and so he had to like go to like Colorado to get tested, you know, so it might be a services thing too in the state specifically. Yeah,
lack of access to healthcare, of course, is a recurring theme, especially affordable healthcare, and especially, as you said, like the specialists and resources that in a crazy place like Canada you know, actually provide.
I mean, even in Canada, though, I don't know, it might be the same in rural areas as well, right? So right. I grew up in a city, it's a bit different. I'm sure there's probably these issues over there as well, so.
Right. You know, I mean, yeah, in the U.S., you know, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, I mean, that was landmark, but I think still leaves a lot of folks out in terms of the resources they need.
Mm-hmm. I think especially with invisible disabilities, that's a big one. It's like we are making a lot of progress with disabilities, like, and that's great, but invisible disabilities is still another kind of thing. It's easy for them to go unnoticed, right?
Right.
To pretend like everything's okay. So
yeah, for better, for worse. Are there effective treatments for this disorder that Adam is using, or?
There aren't. There's no like treatment for it, you know, like it doesn't go away. But there are ways to manage it and cope. Normally he would wear headphones at work, like noise canceling headphones, and so that helps him focus. Didn't want to wear them when we were shooting, but it worked out. So like, he'll wear those. He avoids social situations, that's his thing, right? Or if he's gonna do them, it's gonna be one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And then in a school setting, often what people will do is they'll have like, the teacher wears a mic, and then that goes directly into their ear, and then the student would sit like at the front of the class and then watch the professor. Adam had access to that, but then didn't like sitting in the front of the class, you know, because then he felt like he wasn't like part of the cool gang, so he just wouldn't do it, you know. But so yes, there's like, you know, tools for these people, but then do they want to stand out? Do they want to look different? Do they want, you know, that was Adam's like struggle. So.
Right, when especially at an age where you're trying to conform and everything, you don't want anything to make you different.
Yeah.
Great. Well, one or two last questions that we ask our filmmakers that we speak with, Christine, is around impact. You talked a lot about how, you know, this sounds like making this film changed Adam himself in some positive ways. Or are there other impacts that you think this film should have on the viewer, or you'd like to have? You talked also about empathy. Is that one of the main things you wanted to get across?
I would say so, yeah. I think empathy, main thing, and hopefully some kind of curiosity. Like, I know this film doesn't explain auditory processing disorder, but if it makes someone want to go and Google it and look into it, then I'm happy with that too. I'd love to be able to do something longer someday that does explain it, but for this short form, I felt like this was
Right.
A good way to hopefully communicate or engender empathy.
Yeah, for sure. I think it did. And then what are you working on next? Is there any place that we can follow what you're up to next, film wise?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in the making right now that will probably come out in the next year. So right now I'm working on a documentary about sex workers in Montreal, and I'm looking at kind of similar themes as Adam. It's not at all the same subject, but what it's like to commit social suicide, to like live in a society where you never really feel connected because you're constantly having to hide who you are, and at the same time, like, being disgraced. So talking about that, I have like interviews with these women, and I've shot all the footage I need. And so I'm kind of working on that in post right now. And then a few narrative films that I also did in the context of school, just like fun coming of age as like a lesbian kid. Yeah, things like that. But on my Instagram page, I'll probably be announcing those like in the next year or so.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're excited to see them. It sounds like you are interested in stories that have some social relevance or social impact connectivity. Is that the case, or is that just what happens? You happen to tell stories about?
For sure. No, I think it's a recurring theme.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm always going to root for the outcasts and the people that I think are misunderstood, for sure.
Yeah, punching up, as they say. Yeah. Thanks so much for doing this, Christina, and we're looking forward to seeing what you do next as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor. I hope we can keep in touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.